On June 12, 2026, one number broke Wall Street's brain. A rocket company touched the $2 trillion mark intraday. For a moment, worth more than Meta, more than Samsung, more than Tesla. Pause on that. A rocket company bigger than the giants. And here's the part that makes no sense. This company had never, not once, posted an annual profit. So how do you sell a story worth $2 trillion? The company is SpaceX, the ticker SBCX on the NASDAQ. It priced its shares at $135 each. It sold over 550 million shares in one go. That raised close to $75 billion in a single day. A private rocket venture, suddenly one of the most valuable firms alive. This is the story of how belief outran the balance sheet. Stay with me. The numbers only get stranger. $75 billion. Let that figure really land. The old IPO record was Saudi Aramco, about $25.6 billion. SpaceX raised nearly 3 times that amount. Alibaba's famous 2014 debut, roughly $25 billion. Visa, Facebook, the great listings of history all sat far below. SpaceX didn't just beat the record, it lapped it. And on day one, the buying frenzy only intensified. The stock opened at $150 a share. Against the offer price, it closed up about 19%. Intraday, it spiked past $176. Over 500 million shares changed hands in hours. Second biggest IPO day volume in NASDAQ history. Only Facebook beat it. The market was desperate to own a piece. But of what exactly? Now the puzzle that should not add up. In 2025, SpaceX pulled in about $18 billion in revenue. But it posted a net loss of roughly $4.9 billion. Too unprofitable, in fact, to qualify for the S&P 500. A $2 trillion company that can't make the index of big earners. So how is a money-losing firm worth $2 trillion? The valuation multiple makes it even harder to explain. At the offer price, SpaceX traded near 94 times its sales. For context, mature blue-chip giants trade at a tiny fraction of that. No company this valuable has ever carried such a multiple. So investors clearly weren't buying the earnings. They were buying what comes next. To understand that bet, we have to rewind. 2002, Elon Musk found SpaceX with a wild idea. The goal: make launching to space dramatically cheaper. The dream behind it: one day, settle Mars. Almost everyone in the industry thought he'd lose his fortune trying. And for several brutal years, they were right. First launch, 2006. It failed 29 seconds after liftoff. 2007, the second flight failed again. 2008, a third straight failure. Roughly $100 million of Musk's own money burning up on the pad. SpaceX was nearly out of cash, with one shot left. Tesla was bleeding too. Musk was almost personally broke. Everything came down to a fourth and final attempt. September 28, 2008. The fourth Falcon 1 launch. This time, the rocket reached orbit. The first privately built liquid-fueled rocket ever to do it. They'd succeeded with almost nothing left in the tank. It was survival, but survival isn't the same as success. And then, weeks later, the lifeline arrived. December 2008. NASA hands SpaceX a $1.6 billion contract. Cargo runs to the space station. At least 12 missions. That deal didn't just fund SpaceX. It saved the company. In 2012, Dragon became the first private craft to reach the station. By 2020, SpaceX flew NASA astronauts, a first for any company. But the real revolution was still one idea away. Here is the turning point that changed the whole industry. December 2015. A used Falcon 9 booster comes back and lands. Standing upright on the pad, ready to fly again. For 60 years, rockets were thrown away after one single flight. Imagine scrapping a jumbo jet after one trip across the ocean. SpaceX just turned the rocket into something more like an airplane. And reuse didn't only impress engineers. It collapsed the cost. Refurbishing a booster fell from about $13 million toward $1 million. A reflown Falcon 9 can cost near $15 million at the margin. Falcon Heavy is roughly 44 times cheaper than the old shuttle. Cost per kilo to orbit crashed where almost everyone said it couldn't. This is the foundation. Cheap launch unlocks everything else. And the cadence numbers are almost hard to believe. One booster has now flown around 35 separate missions. Landings now succeed about 99% of the time. The fastest turnaround? Roughly 9 days between flights. In 2025, SpaceX flew 165 times. That's more launches than the entire rest of the world combined, which leads to a moat almost no one can comprehend. Here is the moat in one single statistic. In 2025, SpaceX lofted over 80% of all mass to orbit. Number 2 was China, carrying only a small fraction of SpaceX's tonnage. SpaceX outlaunched all of China nearly 2-1. This isn't a lead. It's a different league entirely. And the old champions? They become footnotes. In 2025, United Launch Alliance flew 6 times. Arianespace, 7. SpaceX flew 165. It would take rivals decades to fly what SpaceX flies in a year. Europe's newest rocket is still fully throwaway, a built-in cost handicap. SpaceX broke a monopoly that once charged hundreds of millions per launch. But here's the twist. Rockets aren't even where the real money is. This is where the profit actually lives. Starlink. Internet beamed down from over 10,000 satellites. By 2026, more than 12 million customers worldwide, up from about 1 million in 2022, a nearly vertical climb. And crucially, it runs on recurring monthly subscriptions. That turns rockets into a steady, repeating river of cash. Now watch the flywheel turn, because this is the genius part. Most of 2025's launches carried Starlink's own satellites. SpaceX is, by far, its own biggest customer. It captures the cheap launch advantage entirely in-house. Every dollar saved on launch flows straight into its own network. Rivals stuck on throwaway rockets simply can't match that loop. In 2025, Starlink earned about $11.4 billion. That's roughly 60% of the whole company's revenue. And it threw off around $4.4 billion in operating profit. It is, in fact, the one segment actually making money. Think about what 12 million subscribers actually means at scale. Ships, planes, villages with no cables, all suddenly connected. Starlink is the real engine. Now meet the actual bet. Because the valuation isn't really about today at all. This is Starship, fully reusable. Both stages, not just one. Target, over 100 tons to orbit, roughly 5 Falcon 9s. The booster is caught in midair by the launch tower itself. If it works, cost per kilo could fall dramatically further. If that one word is doing an enormous amount of work. And the record so far is genuinely mixed. NASA picked Starship to land humans back on the moon. A fixed-price deal worth about $2.9 billion. The endgame Musk talks about is a self-sustaining city on Mars. But the flight record so far is mixed. Several tests have failed. Orbital refueling, the key trick for deep space, isn't yet proven. So here's the formula the market fell in love with. You wrap a profitable engine inside an audacious moonshot. Then you add the most powerful ingredient, the Musk premium. The valuation climbed from about $12 billion in 2015 toward hundreds of billions by late 2025, then roughly doubled again. Investors weren't really pricing a company. They were pricing inevitability. And that single idea is the lesson hiding inside this whole story. As Professor Damodaran puts it, a valuation without a story is just numbers. He separates value from cash flow and price from belief. For a young company, almost all the value is the story. And SpaceX may be the purest story stock of this entire cycle. The danger is that stories can detach from reality. And that exact logic was inflating the whole market in 2026. NVIDIA, the great AI enabler, neared a multi-trillion-dollar value. The market's Shiller valuation gauge approached 40. That's one of the highest readings in well over a century. Only the dot-com peak of 1,999 stands clearly above it. History says when stories get this stretched, something eventually gives. And in late June 2026, gravity finally showed up. A major chip stock index dropped sharply in a single day. South Korea's market plunged and tripped a circuit breaker. SpaceX gave back most of its first-week pop within about 2 weeks, sliding back down toward its original listing price. The story didn't die, but it got a sharp reality check. So which kind of story is SpaceX, really? Amazon lost money for years before vindicating the bulls completely. Tesla bled cash for years, and the doubters were eventually crushed. But not every bold story ends in triumph. Pets.com went from IPO to liquidation in under a single year. Webvan raised hundreds of millions, then collapsed into bankruptcy. The graveyard of confident, charismatic stories is enormous. The difference between the two outcomes is never the charisma. WeWork's founder story pushed it near $47 billion. Then it imploded. Theranos and Nikola sold a dazzling future. The technology never delivered. What separates an Amazon from a Theranos is substance. It's a credible path to profit and technology that actually works. SpaceX clearly has a real engine in Starlink. The open question is whether the bigger bet ever pays off. Now let's be honest and walk through the bear case. SpaceX burned roughly $9 billion in free cash in 2025. It carries no key person insurance on Elon Musk himself. He controls about 85% of the votes. Shareholders can't overrule him. And Amazon, Blue Origin, and China are all finally launching back. The moat is wide today, but it is not permanent. And the experts? They wildly disagree on what it's worth. One firm launched coverage with a sell rating and a low target. Another pegged fair value far below the IPO price entirely. That gap tells you this is a bet on a story, not the numbers. When the smartest analysts can't agree, the uncertainty is the message. And remember, this is analysis, not investment advice. Always do your own homework before acting on anything. So let's tie this entire arc together. 3 failures and near bankruptcy. Then a rocket that lands and reflies. That built an 80% moat and a Starlink cash machine. Wrapped the whole thing in Mars, and the market paid trillions for belief. The proven core is real. The grand moonshot is still unproven. Because in the end, markets price stories, not just earnings. The real question is the one no one can answer yet. Starship hasn't yet flown the way the valuation already assumes. It is a once-in-a-generation business, wearing a once-in-a-generation price tag. So is this the next Amazon, or the next great cautionary tale? That coin is still spinning in the air. And the day a story like this breaks, gravity tends to win. A money-losing rocket firm wrote history's biggest IPO on a story. The lesson here isn't really about rockets at all. It's about the eternal tug-of-war between belief and numbers. If this rewired how you see the market, consider subscribing. We turn the biggest numbers in the world into one clear story. This has been Chronicle. We'll see you in the next one.